This video will show you how to replace the front brake caliper on a Cadillac CTS. This is part of the front braking system located behind your front wheel. Let's get into it. Let's get ready to remove our front wheel. To do that, the first thing we have to do is safely raise and support the front of the vehicle so the wheel's off the ground. Once you've done that, you're going to remove all 5 of your 19mm lug nuts so we can get the wheel off of here. Now, as far as the bleeder screw, I'm going to be using an 11mm wrench. I also have a collection receptacle. I'm going to open up the bleeder screw with my collection receptacle. After that, I'm going inside of the passenger compartment. I'm going to press the brake pedal all the way to the floor and hold it there with something such as a pry bar. That will force fluid out through the flex hose and caliper. Once it stops, it's going to help prevent any fluid making its way out as we continue on with our repair. So with that said, I'm just going to go ahead and put my collection receptacle directly on this bleeder screw. My wrench first. Slide that on. Now at this point, I'll open up the bleeder screw, make my way up inside the passenger compartment just as I mentioned. Now that we have full pressure on our brake pedal all the way down to the floor, I'm back out at my wheel well. I'm going to remove my collection receptacle from here and close the bleeder screw. Now we can continue on making our way down from the bleeder screw along the back side of the caliper. Now in this area, you're going to find you have 2 18mm headed mounting bolts holding our caliper bracket and caliper in place. I'm going to fully remove my first mounting bolt, but start it back in a couple threads after a quick inspection. After that, I'll fully remove the second mounting bolt and set that one aside. That'll help prevent this from falling down as we continue on. Now the caliper should be able to move around, but still stay in place. We're going to dislodge our brake flex hose from the caliper. To dislodge this, we're using an 11mm. Now keep in mind, there could be fluid inside of the flex hose or the caliper, so we don't want anything getting on the floor or on your skin. Now we're moving along to where our flex hose connects to our caliper. In this area, we have an 11mm banjo bolt. Keep in mind, as we start removing this banjo bolt, fluid may come out of this area. Of course, we have a collection receptacle, hand and eye protection at all times. Okay. As I remove the brake flex hose, I did see that one of my gaskets came off of my flex hose. That's a good sign. We need to thoroughly inspect the flex hose on both mating surfaces, confirming there is no pre-existing gaskets. If there is, go ahead and remove them, clean the flex hose, and set that aside. We'll also make sure that we remove the pre-existing gasket from our banjo bolts. Give that a thorough inspection. So now we're holding onto the caliper. As I mentioned, just keep in mind there is still fluid inside of the caliper which might want to make its way out. We can hold onto the caliper, remove that mounting bolt that we started back in a couple threads, slide the caliper out of place, and we'll bring it over to the bench. Okay, so I have the caliper over on the bench. What we need to do is remove the brake pads from it. Just keep in mind there's going to be fluid inside of the caliper. You could either be careful not to spill it out, or if you have some sort of protective plug, you can just go ahead and slide that directly into the port. Either way, just try to make sure you don't spill any brake fluid. We'll turn the caliper over. Now inside of this area, you can see where the brake pads are located. You don't have to disassemble the caliper to remove the brake pads in most cases. Just carefully reach inside, pull them towards the center, and slide them directly up and out. As you start removing the brake pads, give them a thorough inspection. We need to make sure that you can see the braking material and it's not worn at an angle or damaged in any way. We'll also just take note of where each one of the brake pads came from. During the installation process, assuming you intend on reusing your brake pads, each brake pad needs to go back in the original position. This was the inboard pad, so that's where I'll install it on the brand new caliper. Now I'm just going to go ahead and remove the outboard pad. Same process here. I'm pulling it towards the center. It slides right out. Just as before, a thorough inspection of that brake pad. This looks good. This would be on the outboard side on my application. And there it is, friend. Okay, let's prepare our brand new caliper for installation. The first thing we have to do is disassemble it. We're going to remove the caliper from the caliper bracket. For our slider pins, I'm using an 18mm wrench. You could also use some pliers. This is essentially just to prevent the slider pin from spinning on us while we continue on the removal of our slider pin bolt. For my slider pin bolt, I'm using a 17mm. Do the same thing on the other side here. Let's remove the caliper from the bracket. For now, we're going to set this aside. Now, continuing on, while focusing on the caliper bracket, I always like to remove each one of my 2 caliper slider pins from the bracket. We're going to clean off any assembly lubricant. Once we've done that, we'll continue on with adding high temperature caliper lubricant to each one of our slider pins as we continue on the installation process here. Take hold of the slider pin, we're going to give it a twist and separate it from our protective boot. Now we can see that assembly lubricant. We can remove that. High temperature lubricant. We're going to apply that to all of the smooth portion of the slider pin. And all the way up towards where my fingers are here, there's a small groove. That's where the boot would sit. By applying lubricant in this area, it makes it so no moisture or debris makes its way inside of the port. Line it up, press it in. After you press it in, you may find that there's a considerable amount of air inside of the boot. We want to try to remove that if possible, so I'm squeezing on the boot as I press in on the pin. You can also use a small pick or a small screwdriver. You just want to be careful not to cause any damage. So I just like to make sure that my pins are properly inserted. As you can see, that boot did not sit properly, so I just need to adjust that. Now, once you've done that, we're focusing on each side of the caliper bracket. Continue on with your high temperature caliper lubricant. This is going to help with vibration dampening and noise reduction. It also helps keep moisture out of the area. We'll apply some on each side of the bracket. Now it's time for our bracket tins. Just line them up, press them on, double check to make sure they're secured in place. Same process for each here. This caliper bracket looks good. We'll set this aside. Let's continue on with the caliper itself. Now, as far as the caliper, we're going to apply high temperature lubricant to each one of our caliper pistons. After that, continue on with the lubricant along the backside of each of the 3 ears on the caliper itself. Essentially applying lubricant to only the areas that touch up against our brake pads. Okay, let's get this over to the vehicle. At the vehicle, we're starting with the caliper bracket. We'll slide this over our brake rotor. Continuing on, we have our 2 mounting bolts. Start them in, snug them up. The torque for these are 96 foot-pounds. Double check to make sure the bracket's secured in place. We'll continue on with our brake pads next. Now, as far as the installation of our brake pads, as you remember during the removal process, I had mentioned that the inboard pad needs to be on the inboard side during the installation process. Typically, you can clearly see some sort of markings on the brake pads, which would indicate where the brake pistons would have been. The installation of either brake pad will be the same. Just go ahead and line them up, roll them into position. Once you slide them in, confirm that they can move. If you have to hammer them in with a hammer, more than likely you need to clean up the brake pads in some way. These should not be stuck in any way. So now as we install the rest of this caliper, the caliper needs to slide over each of our 2 brake pads. We'll bring this into position. Continuing on, we'll start in each of our 2 caliper slider bolts. Snug them up. The torque for each of these will be 46 foot-pounds. Now we can focus on our banjo bolt. We want to make sure we have one of our brand new gaskets on here. We're saving the second one for after we slide the banjo bolt through our flex hose. The banjo bolt slides through the flex hose just as I have here. The other brand new gasket goes on the opposite side. Now we have a gasket on each side of our brake flex hose. Let's get this in position. Before we go too much further with torquing this, let's just double check to make sure our flex hose isn't twisted in a way that might restrict brake fluid flow. Now, assuming that's good, let's torque this to 37 foot-pounds. Make sure the flex hose is secured. It should not move around in any way. Now we can do our gravity bleed. The first thing that we have to do is remove the brake pedal depressor. After that, we're going to open up our master cylinder cap, and we're making our way to the bleeder screw. All right, so we're at our bleeder screw. Just go ahead and open that up. Now at this point, we're waiting to complete a gravity bleed. What I mean by that is we're going to allow gravity to draw the fluid from inside of the brake master cylinder down through the entire braking system hydraulics, through the flex hose, through the caliper, and out through this bleeder screw. At first, you're going to see a trickle of fluid with a whole bunch of air bubbles. Eventually, you should see only brake fluid. Okay, at this point, fluid is definitely trickling out of here very well. It's gotten to the point that I don't see any more small air bubbles. This is a good sign. We'll go ahead and close that bleeder screw. Okay, let's just go ahead and clean up any mess real quick. We're going to top off our brake fluid. Okay. Reinstall the cap. The next thing you have to do is make your way up inside the passenger compartment. You're going to pump up the brake pedal. Make sure it feels firm. Assuming it does feel firm, just go ahead and double check to make sure you've cleaned any mess, reinstall the bleeder screw cover, and move along to installing the wheel afterward. If it does feel like it's sinking to the floor, you're going to want to continue on with a manual brake bleed. For this, I like to do all wheels. One last quick inspection in this area and we can reinstall our wheel. With that in place, we'll continue on to all 5 of our 19mm lug nuts. We'll start them on, get the wheel back on the ground, torque each of them to 100 foot-pounds in a crisscross manner. I've got the wheel back on the ground. Let's go ahead and torque these lug nuts to that 100 foot-pounds. torqued. Now, since brake fluid is corrosive to your vehicle's paint, let's put a protective barrier in between the master cylinder and the paint on our vehicle. The next thing we have to do is clean around the top of the master cylinder here. We want to make sure that there's no debris that might make its way inside of the braking system. After that, remove your cap. A quick inspection of the cap. If it looks like the seal's damaged, you're going to want to replace that cap and or the seal. After that, we're going to remove as much fluid from inside of the master cylinder as possible and replace it with clean .3 brake fluid. You can also use .4 as necessary. To do this, you can use a small fluid extractor. Remove as much fluid as possible. Just be careful not to get it on your paint. Once you've removed as much fluid as possible, we have our clean .3, .4 brake fluid here. We'll top it off. We'll reinstall the cover. Now at this point, to start bleeding the brakes, we're going to have to make our way behind each one of the wheels. We're starting at the passenger side rear. Now we're starting our brake bleeding process at the passenger side rear. After I've completed this, we're going to the driver's side front. After completing bleeding 2 brakes, you need to stop at the master cylinder and top it off with some clean .3 or .4 brake fluid. Now I have a helper inside the passenger compartment. They're going to pump up the brake pedal for me. Of course, I have a collection receptacle and my 11mm wrench back here for my bleeder screw. Just get my wrench on there. Okay, go ahead and pump up the brake pedal, please. Now we can see fluid making its way up and through this hose. We need to continue this process till we see only clean brake fluid making its way out with no air bubbles. Okay, you can release, thank you. At this point on my application, I saw that I had only clean brake fluid making its way out with no air bubbles. That's exactly what I need to see. Of course, on your application, you'd want to repeat this process as many times as necessary till you found the same. Once you've completed this caliper, just make sure you clean up any mess. If you had a bleeder screw cover, reinstall that, and we'll move along to the driver's side front. Now let's remove our bleeder screw cover from the bleeder screw. I like to fully remove it. We'll set that aside. I've turned the wheel so we can have a better look at the bleeder screw here. Now I'm going to be using a 10mm for my bleeder screw. I have the person inside the passenger compartment. They're preparing to pump up that brake pedal for me, just as we did before on the other caliper. So of course I need my collection receptacle, 10mm wrench. Go ahead and pump up the brake pedal, please. As you can tell, we do have a considerable amount of air coming from this particular brake, so we're going to continue on this process. As for your application, if it looks like it's just clean brake fluid with no air, you should be good to go. Just clean up any mess. Let's continue on. Go ahead and pump, please. I'll just remove my collection receptacle. Make sure that that's nice and tight. And clean any mess. Now I do have a bleeder screw cover, so I'll install that. Now that I've finished bleeding 2 of my brake calipers, we need to make our way to the master cylinder. We're going to top it off to confirm that we do not draw any air inside of our braking system. Once we've topped off that master cylinder, we're going to the driver's side rear, we're going to bleed that caliper, and then I'm going to go to the passenger side front to bleed that caliper. Afterward, I'll be meeting you at that master cylinder for a final top off. All brakes have been bled. Let's remove that cover, top off the brake fluid one last time. Make sure that's nice and tight. We'll clean any mess in this area and we can remove our protective pad.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.